Welcome to Hope at Night, featuring Andrew Gonzalez, Marco Topete, Q&A with our live audience, and host Anil Kanda. Today's episode, what happens when you say yes to God? And here's your host, Anil Kanda.
How many of you enjoy going on adventures? Maybe it's hiking a mountain for the first time, traveling to a new country, or just braving a family road trip with 4 kids and a dog. But tonight we're talking about a different kind of adventure, the kind that starts when you say, "Yes, God, I'll go." Our first guest is no stranger to adventure. After all, it's not everyone who gets deported from Mexico to the U.S. He worked as a commercial salmon fisherman in Alaska to pay for college, spent winters spearfishing in the Bahamas, and proposed to his wife in an abandoned coal mine 14 days after meeting her in an airport. But his greatest adventure yet was when he followed God's call to sell everything he had and move to Mozambique. Please welcome to Hope at Night, Andrew Gonzalez. Andrew, thanks so much for being here. That's quite the bio you have, being deported from Mexico to the U.S. Could you explain that?
I grew up in the northern mountains of Mexico. And then I came to college in Tennessee because Tennessee had the largest population of salamanders and skinks than any other state in the United States, so why not go to Tennessee? And during my senior cruise, I had the brilliant idea to jump off of the top deck of a Carnival cruise ship into the waters of Cozumel. And the Mexican Navy picked me up, and it didn't matter how much Spanish I could speak. It didn't matter how like all the stories that I could tell them about where I grew up and everything like that. They said, nope, you're an American cruise line. And so they took my credit card and deported me out of Mexico with my own money.
How cold was the water?
Oh, it was beautiful. It was beautiful water. It was the water was not an issue. They said you're lucky the 8 didn't get you, and I said the 8, and it says there's 8 bull sharks that hang around the bottom of this pier right here. They love to see anything that falls off that cruise ship.
So could you tell us a little bit about your fishing background? What is the difference? I mean, obviously there's a difference between commercial fishing in Alaska and spear fishing in the Bahamas. I mean, what's that all about?
Well, my parents properly named me Andrew. He was a fisherman, and I've always loved the water. I think my dad tells the story when I was 6 years old, I jumped off of a dam into the water, and he thought he'd lost his son. So my parents knew I was going to die very young, and I got into these adrenaline-inducing hobbies, and fishing in Alaska actually pays for you to go on other adventures. So when I'm not fishing, I'm usually fishing. And in the Bahamas, I remember a friend of mine invited me to go on a boat, a sail ship. And I just got in the water with a mask. I didn't know what I was doing. And I would spend 10 hours out in the water trying to hunt my own food.
And you eventually proposed to a girl that you met at the airport 14 days later in an abandoned coal mine. Now you got to share that. What's that all about?
So I met this girl in an airport, and this is the Knoxville airport. I saw her smiling, and I was smiling. So I walked up to her and I said, what is a beautiful girl like you doing in an airport all by herself? And she smiled and she laughed, and we started talking. I invited her to dinner, and I knew this girl. The moment that I saw her, I knew that I was going to marry her, and whether she wanted to admit it or not. And I called some friends. I had a friend in Zimbabwe. I got a diamond from Zimbabwe, shipped to India. I had a friend in India put this beautiful ring together, and they shipped it to me, and I got it 13 days after I met her. And so I needed to propose to her the next day.
Because you got the ring and you had to put it to use, right?
And I was like, okay, so this has to be something incredible, something amazing. I need to know that this girl is willing to follow me halfway across the world. So how am I going to do this? And there was an abandoned coal mine that.
Where was this at, by the way?
This in Tennessee.
Tennessee, okay.
In Tennessee, and there was this abandoned coal mine that they shut down because it collapsed.
Perfect place. I can see this already setting up.
There was a flooded mine shaft that nobody was going into because it was flooded. Okay, so I told her, put on this wetsuit. It's like 11 o'clock at night, April 14th, and I told her, put on this wetsuit. She puts on the wetsuit, and we get on the car. We start driving. 30 minutes into this drive, she's realizing it's almost midnight. Where am I going? And so we had some conversations. We talked about this greatest adventure of our lives, and I made her go through 500 yards of flooded coal mine tunnel in order to get to a place that hadn't been seen or visited by anyone since it collapsed back in the 20s.
Were you there before? Have you ever been to that
I
place?
had explored certain parts of the mine, but not that part. And I knew that because there was fossilized footprints on the ground, and nobody else had deserved the area. And something really interesting, the diamond actually had fluorescent properties. So I told her to turn off all the lights. Then she started panicking, and she said, "Why?" And I said, "Just, you need to trust me." So she turned off all the lights, and I pulled this ring. And I was saying something romantic, and all she was doing is she was hyperventilating because she was seeing this glowing thing in front of her, and she knew what it was. And she said yes. So if she would have said no, I would have probably left her in the coal mine. And I wouldn't be right here talking to you right now.
I'm glad it all worked out. Andrew, it seems that a lot of your life is the beginning of a horror movie.
Oh, most definitely. Yes, exactly.
Tell us a little bit about your wedding.
So my wife wanted a winter wonderland wedding, but I was fishing in Alaska, and we needed to get married so we could go to Africa on our first mission trip together. And I said, I know a place where it's winter in August. And so we chartered a helicopter to took us up to this hanging glacier. It's a glacier up in the mountains that spills onto another glacier before it goes into the ocean. And I took a power drill, 600 Colombian red roses, and I drilled a bunch of holes in the glacier and made an aisle out of red roses. And that's where we got married. We even had a ring bearer, and I thought that was, fitting for our life.
Where was this glacier?
In Cordova, Alaska.
Okay.
That's my little fishing town. It's got 2,400 people during the winter, and during the summer it turns into 4,000 people.
Andrew, it just seems that you live a life of adventure in everything you do, from being a teenager to, finding a girl in the airport, to taking her down a coal mine shaft, to marrying her on a glacier. Your whole life you just seem to be full of so much energy, and you want to push yourself to the limit. But you also remember when you begin to hear God's voice speaking to you, Him calling to you. Could you tell us about that?
I grew up a missionary kid, and my mom would always read me the Bible stories. And I believed that there was a God, but I didn't want anything to do with Him, because how could a perfect being love an unperfect individual? And my entire life growing up, I knew that I was not normal. They call it ADHD now. They call it neurodivergent. They call it reckless, borderline sociopath. But I was not a normal person, and I never felt like I fit into this box of what other people expected me to be. And I wanted nothing to do with Christianity, because Christianity just seemed to be this boring thing where you go and live a life of misery in expectation to go into this place where babies play harps with diapers in heaven. It was just boring. Why would I want any part in this? So one day when I was in college, I got a phone call from a lady, and she said, it was late at night, and she called me and she says, "Hi, is this Andrew?" And I said, yes ma'am, this is Andrew. She goes, "My name is Brenda Lang. Did you really jump into the Alaskan waters to chase after a shark because it had stolen your lure?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am, but how do you know that story?" She says, "Never mind that. My name is Brenda Lang. I'm calling from Mozambique, Africa. I have an orphanage here in Mozambique. I would like you to come and volunteer for us. It's a really, really difficult place to get to. We're in the middle of a civil war. There's a lot of snakes, and usually people don't want to come to be where we're at." And I said, I'm buying a plane ticket right now.
She knew what to tell you.
Exactly. She knew exactly what to tell me.
She's like, there's nothing but death
Yeah, exactly.
and suffering.
Malaria,
that is certain, you know?
malaria.
Like, I know.
Malaria, dysentery, cholera, all of those things. And I said, yeah, I'm doing this. And it's in the middle of a civil war. So I flew to Mozambique in 2006. And I was there not for the ministry. I was not there for God. I was there for me. Who doesn't want to go to Africa? Who doesn't want to go see lions? Who doesn't want to go and chase after a black mamba? They run 17 miles an hour. I couldn't catch up to it. But, and so when I was in Mozambique, they told me, do not drink the water, do not eat the food, do not approach the people about the culture, live this isolated life so that you will not affect your body or your health and you will not affect their culture. I was like, come on, I'm not doing that.
You did everything opposite.
Exactly. I did everything opposite. So if they asked me to go on an adventure, if they asked me to go somewhere, I would go with them. If they asked me to eat something, I would eat whatever they would ask me to. If they would give me some water, if they're drinking it, I'm going to drink it too. Okay? So I did get malaria after being there for a little bit. And I did have, don't know if it was cholera, but I got pretty sick there for a while. But you know what? I was doing what they were doing. And one day, I was playing with the kids, and this guy named Augusto, he works for the orphanage. He came along and he shooed all the kids away, and he made me sit down on a log right next to him, and he said, Mexicano, Mexican, what are you? And I said, I'm a Mexican. He goes, no. What are you? And I said, I'm a Mexican. He goes, no. What are you, Augusto? He goes, I'm a Muslim. What are you? And I thought about it for a long time. What am I? Do I believe that God is the creator of the universe? Yes. Do I believe that God breathed galaxies into existence? Yes. Do I believe that he created us with the ability to have free will and freedom of thought and choose him willingly? Yes, I do believe these things. Do I believe that he sent his son to die for me? Yes. And I told Augusto, I said, Augusto, I'm a Christian. For the first time in my life, I said, I'm a Christian. He goes, no, you're not. And I said, yes, I am. I'm a Christian. He goes, no, you're not. I said, and for the third time, it's like, you said it 3 times, and it solidified in my heart. Yes, I am a Christian. He said, no, you're not. I said, why not? He says, you smile too much. You're always happy. You chase after the snakes, you caught the snake. He says, you eat our food, you drink our food, you argue with us, you play with the kids. He said, you smile too much. I said, Augusto, you already said that. I said, I know, you are not a Christian. And it was devastating to me to realize how the world perceives Christianity. We are just a bunch of bitter, grumpy individuals who know the truth and are smug because you know the truth, and you do not involve yourself with the culture. And if you look at Jesus Christ as my example, I don't even call myself a Christian anymore. I'm a follower of Christ, because Christ was a man that was interacting with the people. He was hanging out with fishermen and tax collectors. Like, Jesus Christ was a man that was hanging out with the people that the Pharisees would frown upon. And that's who I want to reflect. So when I was in Mozambique in 2006, I had another guy, his name is Jamie. He came up to me and he says, God has told me that you're coming back here. And I said, I'll come back to visit you. And he says, no, you're coming back here with your wife and you're going to have your family here. And I said, no, I'm going to buy a boat in Alaska. I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to go spearfishing, continue spearfishing in the Bahamas. I'll come and visit you, but I'm not going to come back to Mozambique, not permanently. He goes, no, you're coming back permanently. And that was in 2006, and I avoided that haunting thing, that prophecy that Jamie had spoken into my life. And when I met Ashley in 2014, when we got married in 2014, we had both read the book Radical. And Jesus Christ said, go forth and make disciples of all nations. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And were we doing that? No. we were living for self.
So as you read this book together, I mean, she was jumping on board with.
Almost. I mean, our wedding invitation says we're going to live a life of reckless abandonment for Christ. So I don't think people believed when we said that. So in 2018, after fasting for 3 days, we were praying, and my wife says, it's time, we need to buy plane tickets. And we bought our plane tickets, we put our house in the market, and we sold our house. We had a rental property, we had a business, we sold our cars, we sold all of our possessions, and we moved to Mozambique. And as soon as we landed, the country broke into war. There was an Islamic insurrection. It's an offshoot of ISIS called Al-Shabaab. It's called, they just call them the youth. Oh, Al-Shabaab, the youth. Oh, look at just teenagers doing a bunch of stupid stuff. And they were going around burning villages and killing people, and they just caused mayhem because they wanted to establish the Islamic State of Africa. And I asked my wife, I said, do you want to go back to the United States or do you want to stay here? She says, we came here to adopt, we came here to follow God's calling, and we're staying here.
She put her hand to the plow, ready to go forward, right?
Yeah, I know, and this is a woman that I married, so that's why she went into the coal mine as a test. I was making sure that I was marrying the right one, right? So we visited a refugee camp, and in the refugee camp we found these two beautiful girls that had lost family members because of the war. They had walked 43 kilometers and till their feet bled, and they were telling me stories about it. And so we established a relationship with the refugee camp, and they told us no. And I said, no, but we can offer these children a better life. We can give them opportunities that nobody else would offer them. And they said no. And so the leader of the group was a witch doctor. And he said, well, we invited him. I said, come to our house to live and see where we live. And who invites a witch doctor into his house, right? So we invited this witch doctor to come and visit us, and we drove 5 hours to our village. And he stayed with us for 5 days. And after 5 days, he says, I think I've seen enough. He realized that we live with the community, we live among the people, we eat what they eat.
You weren't outsiders.
Yeah, exactly. He went and talked to our neighbors. We live with a Makua family, and he went and talked to our neighbors, and then he said to me, he said, I think I've figured you out. And I said, what? He says, you're a witch doctor too. And I said, I'm not. No. His name is Banana. I said, Banana, I'm not a witch doctor. And he goes, whatever you have is stronger than what I have. And in Makua, there's a saying, is like the most powerful witch doctor is called like the oldest of the oldest, the eldest of the eldest, because that's the one that's been around for the longest. He's the one that has the most power. And he says, you're older than me. I don't know how old, but you're older than anybody else in this village. And to me, that was just a testament that what God was doing was something that was leaving an impact for the community. So we drove back to his refugee camp, and they said, you're taking these two? And we did. We were like, okay, get in the car and drive away. God has been doing amazing things.
You have a ministry in Mozambique, right? What kind of ministry is it?
So when we first got there and we started the adoption process, we realized that the biggest issue that they were facing is that they have these houses. They've been building these houses. The Makua, we're ministering primarily to the Makua and the Makondi and the Kimoni families. And so they built these houses made out of mud. And these houses will last only about 5 to 6 rain seasons. They have a thatch roof, so when an Islamic terrorist comes along and they just light a match to that house, the whole thing will catch on fire and will be destroyed. Within a few rain seasons, that house will collapse and imagine having to move every 5 to 6 years because your entire house collapsed. So we started, I don't think like most people do, so we started coming up with a solution of how we could do something that would be bulletproof, fireproof, termite-proof, cyclone-proof. And then we started building mud igloos in Africa. So we've built about 10 of these houses so far. And then we can build these houses for $4,000.
Wow.
And they're about 515 to 700.
And they last a long time.
My goal is for them to outlive until the grandchildren. I want the grandchildren to see the houses. I've got 17 guys that work for me. They are uneducated, unskilled. They have no previous experience in construction, and we started building these houses. I've had 3 that failed because we were still learning. We were still trying to figure it out. I saw these grown men that have lost so much in their lives crying over over one of our mistakes. And to me, that was a testament of like how invested they are into our ministry. And then we don't hire Christians. We just hire people that want to work. And so about 60 to 70% of my force is Muslim, and they come to work every single day, and I teach them something new. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to keep them from joining an Islamic rebellion.
How many of these houses have you built?
We've built 10 so far. We just this morning we started the foundation for the 11th house.
Incredible. How many do you want to build?
The vision that God has given me, it surpasses my lifetime. So we want to build a training center for the locals, and we want to build a training center for other missionaries and other nonprofits to come and visit us to learn how they can build these houses, because the same model that we've been able to accomplish, you can reproduce anywhere in the world.
Oh, that's fantastic.
If you can get bamboo, mosquito net, chicken wire, rebar, and cement, you can build these houses anywhere in the world.
You know, the title in your ministry, your particular title is Chief Optimist. What keeps you going?
I'm a stubborn mule. Here's the way that I see it. When I look through scriptures, I see men that are flawed. I see men that are broken. I see Christ that was perfect. And I've seen other people go through worse situations than I have, and yet they never lost their faith. They stayed strong. And so when I look at something that's happening to me, I consider Joseph. My middle name is Joseph. He spent 13 years in jail for something that he was not guilty of. So as long as I'm not in jail for 13 years, my life is pretty good, right? As long as I'm not crucified upside down like one of the apostles, my life is pretty good. As long as I'm not being flogged like my Savior, then my life is pretty good. So whenever I look at anything that's going on in life, I always weigh it to, it could be worse. Now, I'm going to give you a warning. That doesn't always work, especially when you're married to somebody else, okay? So it really, even though I'm an optimist, my wife seeing all of these terrible things that were going on in the country, all of this corruption, all of these atrocities, she was getting worn out. And I made the mistake of focusing on the ministry more than I was focusing on my own marriage. And so now we're here in the United States. We're looking for support. We're looking for people to join us in this adventure. And we're looking for knowledge.
Now, the name of this ministry, Radical Homes, if people are interested in helping out or supporting, where do they find out the information?
So we just built a website. Anybody that wants to help us do and manage this website, try to make it better, it's called radicalhomes.org. And we are a small nonprofit. We're still getting up off of the ground, and we've spent most of our savings doing this because we believe in what we're doing. And so
that's fantastic. Andrew, it's been an adventure just talking with you. Andrew's story reminds us that following God's call is the greatest adventure, and the safest place to be is in the center of God's will. God's calling isn't always comfortable, but it is powerful. And when you build your life on His plans, He can use you to build hope for others, literally. Up next, we'll meet someone who went from selling drugs to selling hope. We'll be back after these messages. Don't go away. Welcome back to Hope at Night. We've heard from Andrew Gonzalez, who has been on an incredible journey following God's call to serve. But what if you don't feel worthy of being on God's team? Can God still use people who have dark past? Our next guest went from jail time to Jesus time, from felony probation to full-time ministry. And just when he thought his story was over, God sent him on a mission, one door at a time. Please welcome to Hope at Night, Marco Topete. Marco, we had you on a previous episode, and I'm sure people are interested. They can check out the website to find more information about this episode. Could you briefly recap your story for us?
Was involved for about 10 years in selling drugs and also being a drug addict. So that's kind of the background that God saved me from. Picked up a felony case and was facing 5 to 10 years in prison.
For what? Could you tell us?
Vehicular manslaughter.
Okay.
Yeah.
And through all those past experiences, God brought you through out of all that, right?
I'm still amazed. I'm definitely still amazed, yes.
Yeah, it's amazing when you think back on all the things that God has done to preserve our lives.
Yeah.
Now, through it all, you realized over time that God had a calling on your life.
Yeah.
And he called you to serve. Can you share with us just a little bit about your life of service and what the things that God began to call you to do?
I feel like it started at my local church.
Okay.
At my local church, I always was looking for ways to be able to share about Jesus. We had one lady who had gone away, got trained to conduct Bible studies home to home. And as soon as she got back and I knew her, I asked her, I said, Stephanie, can you take me with you? I want to go door to door with you. I'll just watch. I won't say anything. And that's what she did. And then I started to make that as part of my life as well. So
door-to-door selling.
Door-to-door. Well, this was door-to-door giving Bible studies. So just reading the Bible with people in the community who otherwise had no real experience opening the scriptures. And then I took that to then Christian literature. Books, pamphlets, magazines, anything that talked about Jesus, I would carry that in my backpack. I would take it from church. They knew, obviously. Right. I would put that in my backpack, and when I would go to school, riding the city bus, I would distribute pamphlets, books, and things of that nature to people that were sitting on the bus and strike up conversation. So that was kind of what led me, without me realizing it, into officially joining a ministry that focuses on youth and young adults, going door to door, telling people about Jesus and sharing books on donations.
Marco, that sounds like hard work. Look, I remember when I was a kid and I had to sell these chocolate bars for $1. Mm-hmm. And that was difficult and scary. Mm-hmm. What was your experience like in the very beginning of this?
It was probably, to this point, the most difficult thing I've done. And I joined a program called Youth Rush. And in this program was high school and college age students would come together and they would go door to door 5 days a week, almost 8 hours a day, so 40 hours a week. And they would leave these books that talked about health and spirituality on a donation basis. And my experience into that was incredible because I came from a background where I was living on my own, kind of doing my own thing, to then coming to this highly structured and organized form of ministry where I had leaders that were younger than me telling me what to do. And that was incredibly humbling.
I can imagine so, right? Some of the challenges, some of the difficulties that you had in doing this door-to-door work, what were they?
Just the rejection. Realizing that most people don't even give you the time of day to share what your name is, and also, let alone, to talk about God. Although, yes, this was door-to-door sales, and although, yes, we were leaving books on donations, this was Christian mission work. What drew me to this program was being around like-minded individuals that wanted to share the gospel. So that's kind of the context of how I got here. I remember my first sale wasn't even about a spiel. I knocked on this lady's door and the lady was freaking out at the door and she said, "Young man, can you help me with something?" I said, "Sure." And apparently she had some phobia against lizards, and there was one on her door panel in the side yard. So she gave me a broom and she said, "Go in through that gate." And I went, knocked off a lizard off her door. She gave me $20 and I gave her a book about Jesus.
Now, could you share with us some of the highest points you had or the lowest points you had in this door-to-door ministry?
I noticed that going door to door gives you a lot of time to think. right? A lot of time. If you're walking door to door in at this point, it was in Fresno, California, my first summer.
Fresno's hot, by the way.
8 degrees, extremely humid, and I lost a ton of weight just walking. But a lot of time to think, and then you start to really get into who you are. I think that's the biggest challenge is you and God and this door. And but some of the highlights is some of the people you get to meet. Sure, 100 people said, "Get off my yard," and called me by my French name. But there was always those individuals that lead you not only to have an incredible experience with them, but to have an incredible experience with God. I remember Diamond. Yes, that was her name. And I was going door to door. It was hot. It was sweaty. And I was really I was really even doubting if I was doing what I was supposed to be doing. And I asked God, I said, "God, I need you to really confirm if what I'm doing is even making a difference. It's hot, people are not allowing me to speak, and I don't know if I want to continue to do it." So I knocked on the door, lady opens the door, I said, "Hi, my name is Marco, we're students working on the scholarship, I'll let you take a look." And when I attempted to give her the book, she said, "But what are you doing, who are you with?" And I said, "Well, I'm a Christian student," and she screamed, "Ah!" and slammed the door. And I was like, okay, I didn't get training on what to do when this happens. And I don't know why, but I stood there, and finally she opened the door again, and she goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're Christian students," and she screamed again and slammed the door. And I don't know why I stayed on her doorstep, but I did. And finally, she opened the door a third time with a lady standing next to her. And she said, "Tell her what you're doing. Tell her what you're doing." And I said, "Well, we're here to talk about God." And she looked at her friend and she was screaming, "I told you, I told you, I told you." And finally, she let me in. She said, "Right before you came, my friend came over and she's going through something really difficult. I tried to tell her about Jesus and about God can help her, and she was crying and told me that God is not real, he doesn't exist, and doesn't care about her." And I told my friend, "God is so real, if he wanted to, he can bring someone to our doorstep to talk about him." And there I was knocking on that door. I mean, that story still gives me chills. You cannot make stories like that up. So what it did for me as a young person, new to the faith, trying to walk with God, trying to understand my mission with God, coming from my background, was that God could use me.
That's fantastic. Just to see the way that God uses us, even when we feel unqualified, right? Yeah, do you feel like sometimes you have to have all the knowledge? A lot of people think that, hey, look, before I can serve God, I've got to know everything. I got to make sure, I've been ordained as an elder. I've got all the training perfect. I mean, do you feel like we need to be that way before God can use us?
The story that comes to my mind was the demoniac that was healed. He wanted to go with Jesus onto the boat, but he said, "No, go and tell others what I've done for you." He had not yet gone and gotten this crazy training or this crazy this or crazy that. At that point in my life, I mean, I had no real necessarily official training for ministry and stuff like that, but God was using me and my story to reach others.
Now, Andrew, what if someone tells you that? They say, "Look, God can't use me. I don't know enough. I haven't had enough experiences. I just started going to church last weekend." What would you say to that person?
It's a command. He says, "Go forth and make disciples of all nations." It's not an option. You just do it. Yeah. And he'll provide. He'll make sure that you learn the things that you're supposed to learn. You might get a few scraped knees, and you may get a few broken bones and miss a few teeth, but you know what? You're going to learn that lesson.
Now, you had another experience where you met a Sergio. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, I was going door to door, and I saw this man who was, I think he was cleaning his truck or something like that. And I walked up to him and I said, "Perfect, I'm going to show him a book for kids." He looked older and I figured he had a family. So I gave him a book and he took the book, and I started to tell him, "My name is Marco, this is what we're doing in the community." And he handed back that book and he said, "I don't have children." And I said, "Okay, no, not a problem." So when he gave me back that book, I took another book out of spirituality and I shared that book with him. And I said, "Well, since you don't have a family, let me share this with you." And he goes, "No, you don't get it. I don't have a family. They left recently and I don't know where they're at. I haven't seen them and my wife's not picking up the calls." And at that point, I mean, you pause. Because it's really not about what you're doing anymore. It's about the person who's going through a pretty traumatic experience. And I said, "I'm so sorry to hear about that." And he said, "Yes, I don't want to live anymore. I've attempted to kill myself, but it just didn't work." And at that point, he lifted up both of his sleeves, and I saw just fresh stitches on both of his wrists. And he said, "But I'm going to do it again." And at that point, I prayed and I said, God, what can I tell this man? I wasn't even married at that time, let alone had children. What could I tell this man? So I asked God for help, and this is the next thing I told him. I said, I don't know what you're going through. I'm not married. I don't have kids at that time. I don't know what you're going through, but I know that there's a God in heaven who does. And I made a decision that took the life of a young man too soon. And that's something that I've had to live with and deal with. So I may have not lost a family, but I did lose someone that meant a lot to me. And just as God has helped me, I know that God can help you. And there was a little light of hope in his eyes, little twinkle when he looked up at me. And at that time, I proceeded to share with him the gospel. The fact that there was a God who came down in human flesh and died on the cross for our sins, and that now can give us hope in the most trying circumstances. He embraced me, we cried together, we prayed together, and he accepted a book about Jesus and even requested to be visited by the local pastor.
What a story of how God used you. Speaking of door to door, I usually have like one of 3 people that come to my door. I get Mormons who come to my door. I get the Jehovah Witnesses that come to my door. And then I get the people selling solar power coming to my door. When I have solar power literally on my house, but they still come to my door. But what's contained in the books that you are selling, and why are you so convicted about it? What's so special about the material you have that you feel that people need this?
I've read them. I've read these books. And for instance, one of them is The Great Controversy that talks about the end time events and the prophecies found in the Bible. And I've read that book myself. So since I've read it and I've had an experience with it and it's helped me to understand scripture and to lead me back to the Bible, I want others to read it too. There's a book there called Steps to Christ that talks 13 short chapters on how to have a relationship with Jesus. I've read that book myself. So therefore, for instance, I had one experience in Barstow, California, where I knocked on the door, this young man came out, and as I was trying to engage him in conversation, he told me, I can't do this. I used to be a Christian, but I left Christ. And I said, I used to be that Christian too, that left Christ, and here I am at your front door. And we sat down on this front porch, and I took out Steps to Christ, and we were both going through some of the chapters, and he goes, I can't believe every single one of these chapters is answering the objections of why I should not come back to Jesus. I said, this is your sign. Come back to the Lord. And we both prayed, hugged, and prayed together. Instances like that kept me going.
Andrew, you were telling me earlier during the break that your ministry also shares the gospel. Especially, I can imagine the challenge in an area that's dominated by Islamic influences and some of the challenges you have there. How do you share the gospel?
The area where we're at is primarily Muslim. And so we are there as businessmen, and I like to consider myself a very greedy businessman. What we do is we order micro SD cards from China, and these are 16 gigabyte micro SD cards, and we preload them with the Bible in Makua, in their language. It's an audio Bible in Makua. And then we pay about $3 per card, and we drive our motorcycles to the villages, and then we sell these Bible cards for about 50 cents US. So I'm gonna be rich soon, I'm buying them for $3 and I'm selling them for 50 cents. And so I show up to these villages, and usually what we do is we go to the eldest of the oldest, the imam, which is usually the mosque leader, and we say, hey, we've got a gift for you. We've got you this solar-powered little radio, and pop the Bible in there, and you start listening to something in your language. And the first thing he hears is the book of Jonah, because the book of Jonah has a story of this man who listened to the calling of God, ignored the calling of God, suffered the consequences, and because of his repentance, an entire nation of wicked people repented. And then after that, we go into Genesis and all of that. Genesis, and then Proverbs, and then the gospel, because then that way they can learn everything. So we're there as businessmen selling micro SD cards, and we only allocate 50 cards per village, and we are welcome everywhere we go, because here we are selling these micro SD cards that they can load their music and they can load their pictures on, and they can put them on their phones or whatever. And so we're welcome in places where most people wouldn't be, because we're selling things similar to what kind of like what he's doing. I hate to say we're selling the Word of God, but if we were to give it away, people would think that we're trying to proselytize them or do something. Yeah.
It's fantastic just to see the way that God uses people in different places through different means. But the one thing we all have in common is that God can use anyone. Thank you so much. I know we have much more to discuss. Marco's story reminds us that you don't have to be perfect to serve God. You just have to be present. Service isn't just about what you bring to others. It's about what God brings to others through you. We're almost ready to go to our Q&A segment with our live audience, but before we do that, here's a reminder to visit our website at hopetv.org/hopeatnight, where you can view previous episodes like the one we did with Marco and also download this season's free gift. We'll be back with questions and answers, so please don't go away. Welcome back to Hope at Night. We've heard incredible adventures in service when ordinary, imperfect people answered God's call to help others. But now we want to hear what questions you have for Andrew and Marco. Who's up first? Right over there.
You both have such positive, incredible energy. Do you ever have doubts or struggles and run out of fuel? And what do you do to recharge?
I definitely go through my seasons of being super optimistic, and then go through my seasons of struggling to have passion about what I'm currently doing for God. And what do I do? Whenever I get to that zone, I definitely tell my wife, and this is personal, but tell my wife it's time for me to go to the woods. You know, time for me to just get away from everything, go to the woods. My wife is gracious. She allows me to kind of get away, and I try to do the same thing for her. And also picking up on things that fill me. Right now it's going to the gym. So I throw on my big old AirPods, noise canceling. I go to the gym, and I just do something that kind of fills my cup.
Wonderful. How about you, Andrew?
So even in my worst day of my life, I remember laughing at the irony of what had befallen me. But I just try to look at the positive outlook in life. You know, I read a book when I was a little kid, and it says it could be worse, and it really influenced and changed my life. Whatever it is that you're going through right now, it could be worse. So just look at the glass half full. Right. Even if somebody stole your glass, it's like at least they have some water to drink. You know,
I need some of that.
Like one podcaster I listened to said, when in doubt, zoom out, right? Sometimes it's just taking a step back and seeing the bigger picture. Any other questions?
Andrew, what advice would you give to someone who would love to move to another country to serve and help communities?
What advice would I give to people that want to move is find somewhere where you want to go and pursue that. Like, pursue that. It doesn't matter how many people try to discourage you from it. Just do there's other people that have been there before you. There's very few places in this world where you can go that you're the only missionary that's going to be there. You're the only nonprofit that's going to be there. And you will find connections. Put a smile on your face. Bring bananas to government offices. Bring apples to government offices. And you will make friends everywhere.
And Andrew, from your story, it's very clear you listened to God's call and you came close to people. Those two powerful principles, I think, are especially the idea of you just say, we're going to come close to people. If we're going to be here, we want to be part of them. And that's beautiful. Any other questions?
How do you serve people who come to you seeking handouts rather than demonstrating authentic belief in God's will and God's beliefs?
I remember one Christian that came to me and he said to me, "You're here to help me." I was like, "No, I'm not. I came here to adopt. I'm not here to help you." It's easier for me to work with the Muslim community because they don't expect anything from me. And the Christians have some sort of entitlement of, we deserve to be helped because we believe in the same thing that you do. And I was like, I don't even know what I believe. I'm kind of working it out as we speak. So I'm not the best one to answer that question. I just know that when God lays it on your heart to help somebody, I will take the shirt off my back to do whatever I can for that person. I don't know where the limit is. I don't know where it stops. but you probably have a better idea.
Not sure if it's better, but something that has helped me serving in urban Los Angeles County, and a lot of need that's present there, is early when I was serving there, I was always trying to decipher, because my phone rings probably, 5 times a week minimum, of someone needing rent, someone needing food, someone needing something. And I was speaking to a mentor of mine, and I feel like, as a Christian minister, I feel terrible when I say no. And I don't feel like it's proper for me to say no. But at the same time, I do have limitations as to what I can help with. And the best advice he gave me was set a parameter that you and your team can decide of what you can do in terms of help when phone calls come in. And that's the parameter that you follow, so that now you don't become judge as to who's actually needing help or who's not really needing it but wants to go use it for something else. So set that parameter and allow that parameter to do so. So that's what we did. We sat down as a leadership team. We looked at the resources that were available, and we said, what can we help with should someone call for A, B, and C? This is what we can help with. Boom. Okay. So now we're not judges. Whether you're telling the truth or not, when you call for this is what we could help with.
That's a good way to operate, especially when you can't read people. We don't know what their motives are or their battles or struggles. Right? So, any other questions?
Is it wrong to force your beliefs upon people who might not want to hear them?
I have found that most times they don't want to hear about a God they don't know. I was going door to door in Fresno, saw 2 men working on a car. One of them was mugging me the whole time. I was getting closer and closer. He wouldn't take his eyes off of me. Felt like skipping that house, but finally I just tried to walk up and I said, "Hi, my name is Mark." And the man working on the car said, "We don't care about what you have to say." And I said, "Oh, I'll be real quick." And finally he got out of the car. His friend said, "No, we don't want to hear it." And I said, "That's fine." So I turned around and I was walking away and I said, God, at least I attempted. I'm not going to force it. At least I attempted. And then one of the gentlemen said something under his breath, which I heard. "It's good that religious stuff works for you, buddy." Oh man, that still gets me mad right now. But I turned around. I don't know with what power of the Holy Spirit you want to talk about, but I turned around and I said, "Works for me? You don't even know me. You don't know that when I accepted Jesus, I was on my way to do 10 years in the penitentiary. You don't know the battles that I've fought. You don't know the background that I have. Works for me? This God can work for." And by this time, his other friend got out of the bottom of the car, and they were both approaching me pretty strongly. And I was like, "All right, Lord, this is now your battle." Both these guys, tattoos, smoking, all that stuff. They're right in front of me. They hear the whole. I shared with them what I shared with you guys earlier, very briefly. And at the end, they said, "Tell us more." And by the end of that conversation, they're reaching into their socks, taking out money, buying books that I have. And before I left, I said, "Guys, I don't know when's the next time I'm ever going to see you, but do you want to accept Jesus into your life as your Lord and Savior?" And they said, "You know what? If it had been anybody else, we would not give you the time of day. But because you know where we are currently at, and you've been there, we do." And we held hands, three grown Mexican men, and asked Jesus into all of our lives.
So for me I don't try to tell anybody about, Jesus Christ says, my yoke is, my burden is light, but it's still a burden. So I don't want anybody to get into the stuff that I'm in. So what I do is I just sell micro SD cards and I just build bulletproof houses. And if somebody's going to ask me about what I believe, I'm like, "You don't want what I have." And they're like, no, we want to know why you're doing this. And I said, "Nope, you don't want it." And the more I deny them, the more they want to know. And so you know what? They'll come to me. I don't have to go to them. So I don't try to beat anybody in the head. My mom beat me in the head with a Bible. It clearly didn't work. It messed up my brain. So I don't try to beat anybody in the head with a Bible.
And neither of you are standing on street corners trying to, annoy people, telling them they're all going to hell. It's not like you guys are forcing people in that sense of you better listen to what I'm going to say or you're going to die right now. The way you guys, it just sounds like the way you guys are approaching it, you guys are using talents and gifts that God has given you to best connect with people. And at the end of the day, it's their choice, right? Any other questions?
Andrew, when you and your wife moved to Mozambique, I realized that you are not somebody who's daunted by physical challenges, but what was the most difficult thing for you to adjust to?
I don't like people. I like to be alone. I am a social introvert. I recharge by being alone. And when we moved to Mozambique, everybody knew who we were. Everybody wanted to say hi. Everybody wanted to ask me about how I was doing. How's my cat doing? How's your dogs doing? How's your kids doing? Everybody's asking me questions about my life, and I don't care about telling you these things. I don't want to talk to anybody. I want to just be alone by myself, listening to an audiobook or listening to scripture, right? And so I had to cope with my inability to cope by coping. And that for me was the most difficult thing. And my wife, she would say that there was a lack of privacy, because when you're sick, they come to visit you. When you're healthy, they come to visit you. When you have food, they come to visit you. When you have no food, they're going to come and bring you food. And it's one of those situations you really have no privacy. We've noticed that you've been in the house all day. Why haven't you come out of the house? So it's one of those things, and it's just a cultural thing. I have to adapt to the place where I'm at. I have to put a smile, and I have to let people know that I care about them, and I really care about how your chicken is doing. So let me ask you about your chicken today.
Any other questions? Right over there.
Why do you think people are so distrusting of Christianity if God himself is so loving and cares for us all?
I know why I was so distrustful of Christians once upon a time and God and so forth is just I didn't know him. I didn't know him, and oftentimes I rubbed shoulders with people who said they knew him, but they didn't either.
Gandhi said, I like this Jesus, I just don't like Christians. He said it somewhere around there. And I think that when you look at all people, when you look at all religions, when you look at all people groups, you're going to find prejudice.
Andrew, you went through a period of your life where you were trying to disprove God. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
So even though I went to a Christian college, I didn't believe what they believed. I went there for skinks, salamanders, lizards, and turtles. And I was there taking the courses that I cared about. And one of them that I found was biblical worldview, where I got a chance to experience and study all of the other religions. And one of the things that I found when I was looking through all of those religions, I studied this and I tried to disprove God for 6 years of my life. How can I disprove everything about him? One of the things that I found is that Christianity is the only one where you don't have to do anything. Everybody else always expects you to do something. You have to do something in order to do this, and in order to achieve this, and in order to achieve this, and in order to accomplish this, you need to reach enlightenment and all of that stuff. Christianity is the only one that says, come as you are, right? And God will take you, whatever it is that you have to bring to the table, and he will use you one way or another, right? And it's a gift. And I hate the fact that it's a gift because I want to earn it. I want to earn it. Unfortunately, I can't. There's nothing that I can do. What he's doing in LA, what he's doing out and going and preaching out to the streets, that's harder for me than to go to live in a war zone. I don't want to bother somebody with things that I believe in. So I spent 6 years of my life trying to disprove God, and all I found is a deeper connection with what I believe in now.
That's an interesting journey. Both of you have been on an interesting journey of service, of sharing, being in uncomfortable places, uncomfortable situations. But what's really beautiful, again, is just this reminder that God doesn't call the qualified. We've heard that line before, right? But he qualifies the call. Like God's calling of itself is what qualifies and lifts us up and utilizes us for his glory and his purpose. Thank you. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7, we have this light shining in our hearts, but we ourselves are like fragile clay jars containing this great treasure. This makes it clear that our great power is from God, not from ourselves. So if you're feeling cracked, unqualified, or unworthy, you're in good company. That just means you're ready to carry the light. Because adventure with God isn't about where you start, it's about who you follow. And whether God calls you to cross the street or cross an ocean to help someone else, one thing is for sure, when you say yes to God, you better buckle up because life is about to get interesting. So this is a great time to tell God, sign me up. Because more than ever before, this world needs people like you to bring them hope at night.